นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังคุณุตรังอุปัชฌายังนัมมาสามิ The Buddha teaches us that we don't really know what's what, but we do have an innate capacity to know what's what. And the faith and the confidence that we have in the Buddha and the Buddha's enlightenment is one and the same thing as our faith and confidence in our capacity to know what's what. This is because the Buddha was enlightened as a human being, and through his enlightenment demonstrated, proved the capacity of human beings for enlightenment. We can say he became enlightened as a representative of the human race, as it were. And if we have faith in the Buddha's enlightenment, then we also, the implication, have faith in the human capacity for enlightenment, and therefore the next logical step, and that is that we have faith in our own capacity for enlightenment. So faith in the Buddha means faith in ourselves, faith in our own capacity to realize the truth of things, and that not only can we realize the truth of things, but we should. So faith in Buddhism is something that leads onwards. It's not merely the acceptance of a system of beliefs, but the fundamental faith or confidence is in our ability to abandon the unwholesome, to develop the wholesome, to purify our minds. So if we have any real, let us say, sincerity in that belief, then we have to put it to the test. We believe that we can abandon the unwholesome, so we try to abandon the unwholesome to see whether that belief is tenable, whether it's an accurate, true belief, one based on the way things are or not. Similarly, our belief in our ability to develop the wholesome and to purify our minds. Now, our normal or our conditioned way of understanding ourselves and the way things are is, the Buddha says, inaccurate and false. And wherever and in whatever circumstance we have a false, unfounded understanding, belief, view of the way things are, then craving arises. So craving is that kind of desire which arises from ignorance, lack of true vision and understanding and wrong vision and understanding. So ignorance and craving always arise together. And so in our efforts to abandon the unwholesome, develop the wholesome, purify the mind, we have to deal with both the ignorance and the craving which sustain the whole structure of dukkha, suffering. Now in our practice, we therefore need to develop two aspects, two wings of practice. One is the wisdom faculty, which directly counteracts and undermines ignorance. And the other is peace and clarity, which undermines craving. So the wisdom faculty, the understanding, right view, investigation of the nature of our bodies and minds, the world in which we live, will only really be successful and penetrate deeply when the mind has been stabilized, clarified. It is very common in meditation practice to reach a certain stage in which it's almost as if one peeks over the edge of the cliff or the abyss, and almost automatically withdraws, and fear envelops the mind. So merely an acceptance of Buddhist teachings, an interest in investigation of impermanence, of suffering, of not self, is inadequate for the job, because we need to have the emotional resilience and stability of mind to be able to face up to the implications and the results of that kind of investigation. And one of the central paradoxes of practice is that only the happy mind can really understand suffering. If the mind is suffering, it appropriates suffering as belonging to self. So, to put it simply, if the mind lacks the ability to maintain itself in a stable and clear state, we experience my suffering. And knowing that I am suffering is not an understanding of the First Noble Truth. The understanding of the First Noble Truth is suffering arises due to the Second Noble suffering, craving. So comprehension of suffering entails an absence of the sense of self. And the stable mind produced by the ability to sustain, maintain mindfulness for a period of time is absolutely essential. So these two aspects of practice have to dovetail and work together. The wisdom faculty, the interest in looking at experience, and the investigation of the three characteristics. Also the interest in maintaining clarity, stability of mind through long periods of time. So investigation of Dhamma really only begins when the mind is able to free itself from the clutches of the five hindrances. The five hindrances being sensual desire, aversion, sloth, torpor, mental agitation, guilt, doubt, skeptical doubt. So we don't have to talk about levels of jhana and jhanas and yanas and all the technical terms, but these five hindrances are very important to recognize and also to accept, acknowledge that only the mind which is free of those hindrances has the power, the integrity to understand the way things are. So we're seeking to maintain our minds in a state free of the hindrances. And that mind is one which experiences a very deep sense of well-being. And it is a brave and courageous and fearless mind. So the calming and stabilizing aspect of meditation produces fearlessness, and equanimity purifies mindfulness. So ability to maintain a kind of evenness of mind, ability to look and not to be overwhelmed by the sense of attraction or repulsion to phenomena that we experience is a prerequisite for progress in Dhamma. So the teachings of the Buddha, some of the teachings seem very simple, but are in fact very profound. Some seem very difficult to understand, but as we practice in our experience, they seem quite simple. The teaching of selflessness, of Anatta, is one that can be somewhat intimidating or difficult to grasp. And I think that it's important to recognize that Anatta is not a thing, it's not an experience, it's merely a rejection or a refutation of a wrong view, a wrong understanding. An example, let's say someone phoned up the monastery and said that there was radioactive material in this monastery. So we managed to get hold of a Geiger counter and swept the Dhamma hall and the cloister and all the buildings in the monastery, and then we could finally conclude that there is in fact no radioactivity in the monastery. Now in Pali, the word no, the prefix is provided by the prefix a or a. So you could say there's no radioactivity in this monastery, or it is a Pali-English hybrid here, an a-radioactive monastery. But there is no a-radioactivity, as an essence or something that you can realize or penetrate. It's just a refutation of a false belief or false understanding. So we use the mind which has been made happy, fearless, courageous, stable, bright and clear, to look clearly until we see that what we thought was there is not actually there at all. But it's not that we gain some experience of a thing. It's not a state called Anatta. It's merely a recognition that something that we have been creating or perceived to be present is in fact not founded on the way things are. The one way of looking at our life as human beings is to compare it to a river. Say, the River Thames. Now we, for purposes of communication, we have to agree on fixed names for things. We can't change the names of physical phenomena according to the changes that occur within them or to them. So we have something called the River Thames, and we can all agree that there is such a thing as the River Thames. But the difficulty, of course, arises when we say, well, what is the River Thames? And we say, well, it's the water in the River Thames. Well, if it was the water, then isn't it the case that all the water is running into the sea, and that if you go and look at the River Thames today, and in 10 minutes' time, or tomorrow, or next month, then the water you see is not the same water. And every single aspect, constituent of the River Thames is constantly changing. So we can say there definitely is a River Thames. We're not saying that there isn't a River Thames, but we're saying that that which we refer to as the River Thames is in fact a constant flow, flux of conditions. And similarly with our lives, we say that it's not that there's nothing. We're not refuting our existence. We're not saying that there's nobody here in that way, but we're saying what is here doesn't exist in the way that we usually think it does. And so we're looking very closely at ourselves and our experience of ourselves in the world. And we begin to notice that just as we have this one word, River Thames, to refer to a complex phenomena in one part of a larger ecosystem, then we refer to ourselves as I. But what we refer to as I is changeable. Sometimes we can say, for instance, I feel tired, I'm happy, I remember, I think, I see, I hear, and we have this single word I, but in the first case we're referring to the physical body, in the second case to feelings, in the third to perception, memory, fourth to thought, and fifth to consciousness. So we can see that the word I doesn't change, but what we're referring to actually is not a stable, independent essence. And it's this sense of some stable, independent owner of experience, unchanging center of experience, which the Buddha challenges us to find. So the teaching of the four elements and the five khandhas and all these categories the Buddha gave us are skillful means to look at what's going on, at what's what. And this practice is one that we can carry on in every place that we happen to be, and in whatever we're doing, we're seeing the way that the body and the mind manifest, and we're seeking skillful means to look more closely, more directly. We're studying, we're observing those ways of thinking, those ways of acting, which enable us to stay more closely with the way things are, and those things which obscure the way things are. For instance, we notice that if we we are not very careful and scrupulous in the way that we behave to our family members, to our friends and colleagues, workmates, then we tend to feel a lot of remorse and lack of self-respect, self-esteem. We don't really feel friends with ourselves. And when we lack that sense of self-respect, self-esteem, which comes through the ability to refrain from actions and speech that hurts others, then the sense of self is strengthened and becomes very hard and rigid, difficult to see through. So goodness is, in one sense, that which weakens the sense of self. And if we want to use the word evil or badness, wickedness, it's that which strengthens and makes real the sense of self. So this is where we ground these kinds of concepts of the wholesome and the unwholesome, and the good and the bad, not in some exterior deity, but in the effects of actions, speech, thoughts, as measured by the strength, the thickness of this sense of self. So this is something that we're constantly looking at and interested in. So we seek to develop meditation techniques, and again, not to gain any particular experience as a adjunct or a possession of self, but in order to expose and to penetrate the nature of self, the self-view, and the perception of self. For instance, taking body meditations, looking at the nature of the physical body very, very clearly in a very unsentimental, unwavering way, and just looking at the hair of the head, the hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. And we look at them very clearly at hair. The more clearly that we look, the more that we look with the mind which is free of like and dislike and attraction and aversion, the more we are struck by, the more we are affected by the sense of lack of ownership. It's not that sense of this is me, my hair, my beautiful hair, my unattractive hair. Those thoughts don't arise, and it's just hair. No, hair's just like this. It's just sprouting out of my head just like this. And you see bodily hair, we see nails, just this kind of weird, hard stuff that grows out of our fingers and our toes. And we see teeth. You see how much our sense of who we are and our identity is bound up with our face and our teeth. Have you noticed how the incredible transformation that takes place when somebody takes their teeth out? Suddenly their face kind of just collapses, and it's just that person disappears together with their teeth. They become somebody else somehow. And also notice how intimately related are emotions and particular physical changes or physical manifestations. You can particularly notice that there are certain configurations of the muscles in your face which arise with particular feelings, and then you realize that it's impossible, it's very difficult to imagine having that feeling without that particular configuration, so that the sense of an emotion as something inside ourselves is undermined. And it's interesting that you can create feelings and emotions through consciously adopting particular facial expressions which correspond to those emotions. So it's not just that the facial expression is a result of the emotion, but you can produce emotion by the conscious adoption of the facial expression. So these are kind of interesting ways of looking at this sense of self. If you can make yourself feel really miserable by deliberately adopting a sad facial expression, and just sort of bring the sides of the mouth down, sort of like that. If you do that long enough, you feel miserable, even if you've got nothing to be miserable about. And so it's not just sort of sentimental kind of smile and the world will smile with you. If you smile, you can find it. You just feel better. And this is Anatta. This is selflessness. One of the great forest teachers, Luang Pu Thien, says Anatta doesn't mean that there's no self. He says there is a self, but it's not permanent. So there is this constant flow of phenomena, looking at the body, looking at feelings, looking at perceptions, looking at thoughts, and the three characteristics of impermanence and dukkha and anatta are really three different aspects of the same thing. So the more you penetrate impermanence, and the more you'll understand anatta, the more you look at anatta, the more you understand dukkha. They're all, one leads to the other two. And when you realize how deeply and profoundly that we seek and we feel the need for a lasting, permanent happiness, we realize that the sensual world and the conditioned world must inevitably always be experienced as fundamentally flawed, because nothing which is impermanent can provide permanent happiness. This is when the sense of moving away and looking beyond the sensual world starts to become a stronger and stronger intention in our lives. So we, on the level of sila, we're using our capacity to refrain from certain actions and speech to illuminate intention, to drive a wedge between intention and expression, and create a space in which we can choose whether to act or not to act, and where questions of right and wrong, wholesome and unwholesome, become practical for us. So usually volition and expression are one and the same thing. We act in many ways on a kind of autopilot, and the way that we can create an initial experience of freedom and liberation in our mind is through recollection of precepts. This is the mindfulness of precepts. Enables us to stop and to see. So here we can talk about this again. Technical language, samatha and vipassana, or a very simple language, stopping and looking, and recollection of precepts allows us to stop and to look at what we're doing and what we're saying, and noticing the arising and passing away of this sense of self. And in the Buddhist tradition, we consider that the birth, the arising of the world as simultaneous to, or as a synonym for, the arising of the sense of self. So fundamentalist Christians believe that the world was created 7,000 years ago. Scientists believe it was billions of years ago. But the Buddhist position is that the world arises every moment, that the avijja, the ignorance and craving which constitute this sense of self, arise in the mind. And so we're looking right at that point to see how much of what we do and what we say is this rather pointless striving to promote, to protect, to enhance the sense of self. And there's this idea somehow by gathering and amassing pleasant experiences that somehow who we are becomes richer, becomes more fulfilled. But it's all based on an idea of an owner of experience which can be enriched by experience, pleasant experience, and diminished by unpleasant experience. And the Buddha says, can you find that owner? Where is it? Look closely. So we begin to notice, and this is where the worldly Dhammas rise. They're living in the world, living as a sentient being in the world. We inevitably experience gain and loss, prestige, rank, loss of prestige, rank, pleasure and blame, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. And even the Buddha himself and the great disciples were never free of those worldly Dhammas. Sometimes we have this idea, if we just do everything right, if we can just work out the correct way, then everyone will love us, or everyone will like us, or somehow through being good and pure, that we will not have to deal with loss and decline and blame, criticism, slander, physical, mental pain. But it's not really the case. You see great disciples of the Buddha slandered and misrepresented on a number of occasions. Occasion when Venerable Mahakassapa had a number of enemies in the monastery. They were a sangha with the Buddha at its head, staying in a monastery close to Venerable Mahakassapa's hometown, and many of his relations would come to offer dana. And these monks considered that that Venerable Mahakassapa, well, he wasn't Ajahn, Mahakassapa was attached to the offerings, and they sat around one day and they were saying, we're all going on Tudong at the end of the rains retreat, but I bet that that Mahakassapa won't go. He won't want to leave here. He's too comfortable. He's enjoying it too much. And then towards the end of the rains retreat, the Buddha said to Venerable Mahakassapa, I'm taking the monks off on Tudong, but I think I'm going to leave you here because you know all the lay people, and you're capable of running the monastery. So after the rains retreat had ended, the Buddha took all the monks off, and Venerable Mahakassapa stayed behind, and those two monks were saying, "See, told you so," And this is sort of normal kind of thing. So even greatest arahants can be accused of kind of pettiness and defilement. It's not that you find some place where you're free and everybody thinks you're wonderful once you become enlightened. So the worldly Dhammas remain as long as you're a sentient being in the world, in the physical world. But what's different, of course, is one's attitude towards them, and one is not carried away by praise or hurt by blame, not because one thinks one shouldn't be that way or one is completely impervious, but because one knows that praise is just praise and blame is just blame. Praise is like this, and blame is like this, and you know what it feels like, and you don't expect it to be any other way. And sometimes you get overly praised, sometimes you get praised a reasonable amount, sometimes you get praised less than you should be, and sometimes the people who praise you with a pure motivation, sometimes with an impure motivation. Just looking at, yeah, this is what it's like. It's like this, and you take these things up as objects of study and interest, and you see that there is a relationship. The more that you crave praise, the more that you will fear blame, and the more painful the blame will become. The stronger the sense of self, the more real and the more affected you are by praise and blame. The more you maintain mindfulness, this equanimity, stability of mind, the happy mind, and the more you looking at experience to learn from it rather than to amass and hold on to the pleasant experiences as much as possible and push away the unpleasant, then these things start to fade out. They just become very insubstantial. So the mind which revolves around the sense of self is a rigid, narrow, ignorant mind. And it's to see that clearly. I mean, I remember there's a really nice, funny cartoon I read where there's a man and a woman sitting in this very romantic restaurant, and the man saying to the woman, "Well, I've been speaking about me for quite a long time now. How would you like to speak about me?" So there's this, everything's got to be pulled into this sense of me. And there was some years ago this man tried to assassinate an American politician. I don't think he was successful, but the police all jumped on him, and he shouted out, "Now I'm 1,000th part of history." So this sense of wanting to stand out and to be someone, this whole thing, you can be who you want to be, and this idea of that one needs to be different from others, have some special idiosyncrasy that defines you as someone different from everyone else. And this is a very impoverished state of mind. And so, you can be what you are already. This is more kind of the Buddhist slogan. And so, looking, interested, looking, learning, with the mind fortified with mindfulness. So the Buddha said, or say Ajahn Jayasaro, our teacher, said that to begin with, mindfulness is intermittent, like the drops of water from a tap. It's drop, 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 or perhaps drop, drop, drop. But then if you apply yourself and just keep at it with great persistence, then it's drop, drop, drop. And then you get finally the stream of mindfulness. And the stream of mindfulness is what we call samadhi. So samadhi is not something that you do, but samadhi is the result of sustaining mindfulness. Mindfulness can be compared to a muscle. If you're meditating and your mind wanders, you bring it back, it wanders and you bring it back, it wanders, you bring it back. Some people get very discouraged and say, just wasting the time, the mind just won't settle. But every time you bring the mind back, you are strengthening your mindfulness muscle. And if you are willing to observe your daily life and the effects of your meditation practice on your daily life, you'll begin to notice that in the midst of confusion, when you get distracted, you recognize that and are able to draw your mind back to the present moment much more quickly and easily than you could do before. And that's because the mindfulness muscle, which you've developed in formal practice, has come to your aid. So the Buddha encouraged us to develop this muscle and to take that muscle as a refuge. But the Buddha himself, referring to his own practice and the causes leading to his enlightenment, distinguished two main virtues. One was discontent with wholesome Dhammas, and the second was unremitting effort. And many people know that Buddhism teaches contentment, but perhaps not so many people know the Buddha also taught the value of discontent. So the Buddha says not to be content with the gains that one has, or the progress that one has made in practice, because unless one has reached the first level of enlightenment, the wholesome Dhammas that one has developed are still not fixed, and they can still decline. And this is one of the reasons why many of you perhaps been disturbed by hearing about senior monks who've been in robes for 10 years, 20 years, and then disrobing. And if you have this idea of spiritual progress as like going up a ladder or climbing up a stairway to heaven, then thinking, oh, how could he have been climbing up the stairway all these years and then leave and disrobe? And the way that I would explain this is that if you have say a glass of water with a number of bugs in it, and you want to purify that water, you have to boil the water at 100 degrees. Now, if you heat water up to about 95 degrees centigrade, you can feel that water is really hot. You could maintain the heat for a long time. The difference between the temperature of the water and the boiling point is very small. But if you should release the heat or allow the water to cool down, then you suddenly find that all the bugs are still there. And so many meditators, and monks included, practice to a certain level where their minds become calm and they're able to maintain that sense of calm, and certain insights arise, but they don't take it to the level of boiling point. So all the bugs are latent but still alive. And the moment that one becomes heedless or content with the practices that one has done, then one's creating the conditions to discover that all the bugs are still there, and that can be a very depressing thing to find after one suddenly say, "Oh, I've been wasting my time all these years. I haven't really realized anything at all." So the Buddha says you have to keep striving, keep putting up effort, unremitting effort, until one reaches the goal. And that's not to say that one's overly goal-oriented, but one finds that middle way where one has a clear sense of direction and aspiration and onward movement, but at the same time one is skillful enough to enjoy every step of the path and to be content with the practice, content with one's effort, but not to be content with the results and to be pushing on. So you have to find that kind of middle way where if you're looking too far ahead, then you lose it. If you get too caught up in the details, then you lose it. You seek to find that happy medium in which there is progress in both sila, samadhi, panya. So are there any indications of success? One is growing sense of chanda and enthusiasm for practice, but perhaps more fundamentally, the growth of compassion is probably the best indicator of development of true wisdom, because wisdom and compassion are, like we say, the two wings of the bird, of the eagle. And so if one is, if there is compassion without wisdom, then it's not going to be compassion in true Buddhist sense of the word. And if true wisdom is truly arising in the mind, the understanding of the three characteristics, understanding of selflessness, then compassion arises more and more strongly. The extent to which one abandons this self-centered view of the universe, sees its insubstantiality, then the more one opens up to the suffering of all sentient beings, and the more one feels compelled to do what one can to reduce and alleviate it. So the great teachers, such as Ajahn Chah, you can see that they don't have anything that they need to do for themselves. They've done their own work, and they don't have any personal neurotic needs, and so they have all their energy and all their time to devote to helping their fellow sentient beings. So the wisdom and understanding leads inevitably to compassion. So although in Theravada Buddhism don't kind of trumpet this in quite the same way as perhaps other traditions, it's just considered a natural evolution of the mind, that the wiser the mind becomes, the more compassionate it does. So if one's feeling one really kind of understanding the Dhamma, then this is a good test to see how do you feel, how do you relate towards the people around you, in your family, at work. How do you feel towards, how do you relate to people who don't treat you very well, who are not immediately sympathetic. This is a good test. So we're practicing for liberation. We give dana in order to liberate ourselves from attachment to possessions and to things, and to liberate ourselves from possessiveness and stinginess. Keep precepts, use recollection of precepts as a way to liberate ourselves from harmful actions of body and speech. We develop mindfulness to liberate ourselves from the hindrances, and we use wisdom to liberate ourselves from the conceit, I am. So in every level of the path, right from initial level of offering food, offering dana, offering help and sustenance to those around us, offering our knowledge and time to others, this is a spiritual practice leading to liberation. keeping precepts is a liberating practice. Sustaining, developing mindfulness, liberating practice. And as we become more and more liberated from self, then the heart blossoms with the Brahma-viharas. And this is the path of practice that the Buddha has given us. So these are a few words I'd like to share with you this evening.